Hello, everybody. Today on our show, we have the brilliant Eshaan Kaipa. He is an freshman from University of Pennsylvania and is pursuing his undergraduate in artificial intelligence. In this podcast, we will try to know the things he did through his high school journey, his entire perspective about University of Pennsylvania, and how has his journey been so far, and the things he enjoys at UPenn. Ishan, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to get going with this interview.
Perfect. Thank you so much for coming over and let's get started. So, just why don't you introduce yourself? What have you done? Where are you originally from? What high school did you go to? If you can just go and get started with that.
Yeah, sure. So, hi everyone. My name is Eshaan. I'm currently a freshman at the University of Pennsylvania, studying engineering, concentrating in artificial intelligence. I went to high school in San Jose, California, at a school called Evergreen Valley High School. It's a public school with around 700 students per class. Some of the things, just to name a few, activities I did in high school included tennis. I played competitive tennis for over 9 to 10 years. I was really involved with research related to computer science and astrophysics for 2 to 3 years. I was heavily involved with my school's Math Olympiad club, and I also started my own nonprofit sometime around the end of my sophomore year. And so, yeah, those are just some of the, I think, big things that I did throughout high school.
That is fantastic. That's a lot of stuff that you've done. And I'm sure that, as we go into this interview, we will elaborate on each and every one of them. But before I into the activities bit of it, I just wanted to understand what caught your interest towards AI. I mean, of late, I see a lot of students want to do ML and AI because it's the next big thing that's happening. But personally, I feel that you should only do something that you're passionate about and not because the whole world is doing it or because it's going to pay you well. So, how did you discover your interest for AI and how did you come to the agreement that this is the major I'm going to be looking for in UPenn?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question, Rima. So I can kind of walk you guys through how I came to be an AI major, and this is actually a question, or rather a decision that I spent a lot of time thinking about. So in high school, to provide a little bit of context, I was pretty STEM focused. This was mainly because of two things. One, because first of all, my school didn't really offer that many advanced courses outside of STEM courses. So by default, we were kind of limited to taking, if we wanted to take very challenging courses, ergo STEM courses. So that kind of pushed me into the direction of STEM, um, kind of just through that. And so because of that, I ended up taking a much more heavier STEM course load. And over the course of time, I found that this is what I enjoy. Secondly, also because my parents pushed me in that direction. They both work in big tech, being from the Bay Area, that's kind of the tech hub of the States, right? So I think I've always just been surrounded by tech, by innovative, I guess, technology, if you want to call it that. So I think a lot of that played a big influence in my decision to pursue this field. So I knew that I wanted to go into college as an engineer, right? And so once I entered UPenn, I had the opportunity to kind of think of, what actually like specific degree do I want to pursue in engineering, right? There's like mechanical engineering, chemical engineering, computer science, AI, a bunch of different variations of engineering, right? So I knew that just from my experience in high school and just from knowing myself, that my favorite subject has and is math. So I wanted an engineering degree which was very math specific, and kind of had a lot of course load and content tailored around math, right? Additionally, I also knew that I wanted to take an engineering pathway that focused on software, and could be translatable into programming and coding because I feel like that's kind of where the market is, I think, more open, and that's just where the industry is heading towards. So I knew that I wanted some sort of intersection between obviously like programming, but also a heavier focus on math. And this was right at the crossroads of artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is very tangential to computer science, but it's skewed so that it has a higher emphasis on math courses and less of an emphasis on computer science slash programming courses, which is exactly what I wanted. So I think it just fell very naturally for me to kind of take that route. And also because I actually am very interested in artificial intelligence and machine learning, these new technologies that are coming out, I think are very exciting, frankly. And the growth that they're showing and I think have in different applications, medical industry, business industry, trading industries, are something that, or it's like a surge that hasn't really been, I think, prevalent in the tech industry in a long time. So I think with this sort of flux of AI making the job market kind of so dynamic and disruptive, I think that's something that I want to get involved in. And so all these factors kind of just made it very not easy, but I think the right choice for me to go the artificial intelligence route.
Perfect. That's a great answer. And I think it's pretty comprehensive. If somebody wanted to go for AI and wanted to be sure that, this is the field for them, what do you suggest as somebody who's themselves involved and, went through this process of nailing down that AI is for them? What, if you could just very quickly, briefly put it into steps that, these are the things I would do to check if AI is the desired major for me? That would be great for all of our listeners and viewers both.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the first thing that you need to identify if you are considering going down this AI pathway is to see if math is a passion of yours. Because if math isn't actually a passion of yours, or it's something that you kind of do with reluctance, then I would say that AI is not for you because AI is essentially based off of math. So if you're not inherently passionate about math, then I would rule out AI as a whole. Additionally, I think that you need to have very strong problem solving skills and you actually need to enjoy challenging yourself with these very difficult, engineering content and like the things that you're going to learn as you become a more advanced and I think proficient engineer. Um, I think those two things are some things that you need to do like some self reflection on and kind of identify. Aside from that, I think that it's honestly pretty friendly. You don't need to have a very specific background in a certain subject. I just think that you need to have the actual drive and passion and hunger to learn the subject.
Those are great pointers. So everybody out there who thinks they want to get into AI, math is a non-negotiable. You need to know it, and I think as in when you grow and learn the basics of AI, and as you go up, you should be in a great position to know if AI is you're cut out for that or not. Next question for you, Ishan. How what are the universities you applied to besides UPenn, and what made you choose UPenn? Because it's a fairly competitive university. I think the acceptance rate is way below 5 or 6%, if my knowledge goes. So, how did you kind of choose UPenn and why UPenn besides all the other colleges that you'd applied to?
Yeah. So to answer your question, to answer the first part of the question, I actually ED to Penn, so early decision, meaning that I had to withdraw all my other applications once I was admitted to Penn. Um, but as to why I actually chose Penn, there were a couple of factors that really went into that decision. So one of them was I wanted a school where I could explore tech business. And Penn has the Wharton School, which is the number one business school in the entire world. So having that as a resource, having that in our backyards, is something that I don't think you can find in any other school. And so I knew that as a tech entrepreneur, someone that just wanted to go into the more management side potentially after college, not just become a straight engineer. That was something that spoke to me really, really heavy. And also, I really liked the culture of Penn. Um, I myself am a very like social person, a very outgoing person. I like to talk to people, I like to meet people, and so I think Penn. There's no other Ivy League in the entire world that provides that sort of dynamic intercourse or interplay between kind of you know having a very technical background, but also having a very like social environment for you to kind of learn, meet new people, and basically just network your way up. I think that was definitely what spoke to me about Penn. And then also, to be honest, I think the Ivy League was a big calling card. I wanted to go to an Ivy League institution. And so, of the ones that I had at the top of my list, it was Penn and Princeton. I knew that given the type of personality that I am, I don't think I would have fit into and thrived, frankly, as well at Princeton that I would have at Penn. And so those are kind of the factors that went into me applying to Penn and ultimately EDing.
Okay. And what are the other colleges you had applied to, even though you withdrew? Thankfully, you got into ED, but what are the other colleges that you had on your mind in terms of your list, your college list?
Yeah, so pretty much all the standard top 10s, top 20s. At the time of applying, I had already sent out my UC application. So that includes schools like UC Berkeley, UCLA, UC San Diego, UC Santa Barbara. So all the UCs. I had also applied to a lot of the top engineering schools like University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, Georgia Tech, um, UMD, Purdue. So a lot of those kind of schools. If I didn't get into Penn, I had my applications for the other Ivy Leagues as well as Stanford, MIT ready to go, but I didn't end up sending those out.
Perfect. And now coming back to the profile bit of it. So let's talk about the academics bit of it. Can you let us know what are the APs that you studied all the way from your ninth grade onwards, and how important you think APs overall and your coursework was in Penn deciding that you're a good fit, like of all the things that you've done, and we'll discuss that a little later. Let's talk about academics, APs, and how you think they played a role, according to you, in you securing that admission at Penn.
Yeah, absolutely. So just to provide some context, I took I think 12 APs over the course of my ninth to 12th grade. And to answer your question more directly, most of them were STEM heavy. So I actually stayed away from AP courses like AP Human Geography, AP World History, AP Environmental Science. I took more STEM linear courses like AP Physics, AP Computer Science, Calculus AB and BC, more of those courses. So I spent a good deal of time focusing again on STEM courses. And I think that, at least at a school like Penn, because I know that Penn is very they place a lot of emphasis on your GPA and your transcript. They care actually a lot about the kind of courses you take. So for me, I think it was very important that I took kind of like the upper echelon of APs provided at my school. And not only did I take them, I did well on them. So those two things definitely, I think, were very important in my ultimate admissions.
Okay, so you do suggest that somebody who wants to probably is aspiring to get into Penn, getting into an course that is tech, should take more APs and should do well on those APs and STEM focused APs, right?
Yeah, 100%. If you are trying to go down the path of engineering or computer science, just because of how competitive it is, frankly, nowadays to get admissions for engineering specific programs, you need to definitely take a course load that is centric around STEM slash engineering. And you definitely want to hit kind of the upper echelon or threshold of APs provided by your school because again, it is school dependent. Some of my friends here at Penn, their school only provided like 6 or 7 or 8 APs, so they ended up taking 5 or 6 or 7 APs. My school provided around, I would say, 15 or 16. Not quite sure the number, so that's why I tried to um, pretty much take as many as I could per year. Ended up hitting like 12, which is again, I think, a pretty good number for someone at my school.
And what was your general score? Was it 4 on 5, 5 on 5? Just to give viewers some context on what good literally means.
Yeah, so I think when I said good, I meant the actual letter grade that you receive at the end of the course. So I pretty much had, at the time of applying to Penn, I had all A's. I hadn't gotten anything below an A. So I think in that regard, my GPA was essentially like perfect at the time of applying. But in terms of actual AP scores, I will say that your AP scores don't matter that much in the context of college admissions, but you want to get a score that is at least a 4 or 5. If you're getting threes or twos or ones, it is a little bit of a question mark as to how much you actually learned from the actual course itself. Showing that you got a 4 or 5 shows that you were pretty competent in the course and that you actually are pretty sufficient and proficient with the material.
That is a great answer. So, coming back to one of the things that I see on your resume, you are an AIME qualifier, which means you did your AMCs. And I think a lot of people, have asked us previously how important are AMCs. Should you do 8, 10, and 12? Or, what if you could just elaborate a little bit more in terms of how important you think is doing the AMCs, because the AIME is the next step of the AMC. And how did you go about approaching that?
Yeah, so I think that, to be completely honest, it's not as important as people say it is. It's a nice award to have for sure, but by no means is it the end all be all if you don't qualify to AIME. I would say that me personally, I tried to do my best in it because I was genuinely really passionate about math. And for me, I really enjoyed doing these kind of problems. And for me, it was just a very natural thing to do. It was never like I forced myself to study or really just didn't enjoy the process. I actually did enjoy the process of learning these very niche, competitive mathematical topics. So I think that's why naturally I just gravitated towards, the AMC exams. Um, I think that if there's anything to take away from my answers, to say that don't put pressure on yourself to do well on these exams. If you do good on it, then that's great. But by no means is it going to determine your admissions in any sort of way. I would say that try to do good and push yourself to do so, but don't feel stressed out because you weren't able to advance to AIME or the step after.
Do you recommend AMC 8, 10, and 12, or in what order should somebody be doing it, irrespective of whether they qualify for AIME or not?
Yeah, so I would recommend doing in your seventh, or even if you can in your sixth grade, sixth, seventh, and eighth grade, do the AMC 8 exam. And in eighth grade, try to ideally take the AMC 8 and 10 exam. And so that way, once you hit high school, ninth and 10th grade, you'll be a little bit more prepared, a little bit more accustomed to the style of questions that they ask, and just the overall exam. So that once you're in ninth and 10th grade, you should be able to take the AMC 10 exam, and then 11th and 12th grade, take the AMC 12 exam. But I would say that on years where you're in your 10th grade year, you should be able to take your 10 and 12. So there should be overlap between the two exams in your 10th grade as well as your 8th grade year to take the exam above your current grade level.
Okay, but you should, like, I see a lot of students directly jump to AMC 10 or 12, right? Personally, I think it's a terrible idea. And it would make more sense if you build it up from grade like AMC 8, then 10, and then 12. What's your take on that?
I personally believe it just comes down to the student's comfort level with the material and the exam. If they're confident enough and proficient enough with the content to take those exams, then definitely go for it. But if you feel like you're not at the level where you can excel um, on those exams, then I would say stick to the level which is recommended for you. But I wouldn't tell or kind of disregard students from taking exams above their level because again, these levels are just levels on paper. They're not actually representative of what the student's abilities are.
No, what I was asking is a lot of people, it's okay to take level up. I think what people don't do is they skip a level completely, meaning they don't prepare for 8 and 10. They don't even take the exam. They directly go to AMC 12. And sometimes they do well, other times they don't. So, do you recommend going in order, irrespective of when you're taking it, or do you think it's okay to skip levels from a perspective of a student? Of course, student dependent, but still.
Yeah, I would say that first of all, if you do skip levels, like kind of how you described, you're not going to succeed in those exams at all because the content kind of builds on top of each other. So to do well on those exams, I would definitely recommend going in the progressive order. But if, like, for example, you're like an 11th grader, you've never done the AMC route, and you just want to give your shot at these tests, then I think, yeah, like, there's no harm in doing so. But if you're like an 8th grader or ninth grader and you're trying to get into these exams, I would say start in the progression that the AMC trackway provides. Because otherwise, again, like this content builds on top of each other, right? It's like if you've never taken, I don't know, pre-calculus, how are you going to take calculus itself, right? So plain and simple.
Fair enough. We'll go to the next most debatable topic for today, which is the test prep. I see you did take the SAT with a score of 1540, with 800 on math and 740 on English. A lot of schools going test optional, a lot of students are actually preferring or refraining from taking the SAT. How important do you think it is for somebody who is aspiring to go to UPenn to one take the SAT, and overall SAT's role or any test prep's role in getting you into the top 20-25 colleges in the United States?
Yeah, so I would definitely say this. If you can take the SAT, definitely take it. If that's not an option for you, that's okay. But the way that I view the SAT is more of just like another source of credibility to back up your overall academic acumen as a student. I think that the SAT by no means is it a make or break kind of thing where like if you don't meet a certain score, then you're not in consideration for the school. I don't think the SAT that's not its job at all. I just think that it's another kind of supporting um, kind of statistic that just shows the level of academic achievement that you're at. And so I think that's the role that it plays. Now, in terms of how important it is for these top universities, to be honest, I can't really say because I myself am not too familiar with kind of, the distribution of SAT scores in my grade or across the school. I would like to say that for me, the SAT score helped in my case because I think I got a strong score, but I can't speak to students who maybe didn't submit a score, maybe didn't get as high of a score as they wanted to, because again, like it's just very arbitrary. So I think, like again, I don't have a concrete answer to provide for that, but I would like to say that it's just another data point that helps support your overall kind of image as a student.
Great. So, if I had to ask you that, in your immediate group of friends, probably whoever you hang out with, whether they're from the same major or otherwise, same class or different classes, have you seen people without SAT make it, or do you see most of your friends have had taken SAT at one point in time? Because I know you can't speak for from the perspective of admissions, but at least you would have a fair enough idea if your immediate friends or your coterie of friends have taken it or not. That would probably give the viewers a good idea, and that's why I'm asking this question.
Yeah, definitely. So I think if you ask it like that, I would definitely say that most of my friends, if not all, have taken the SAT. I know for a fact that they've all taken it. They might not have reported it, but they definitely taken it. So I think from that perspective, yes, they've all given the SAT a shot. Um, and I know for a fact that a lot of my friends also have pretty high scores as well. Um, so I would say that, yeah, to answer your question, that's just kind of like in my immediate friend circle.
Absolutely. So that's a great answer. Again, nobody knows how the admissions work until otherwise you have an admissions officer someday from Penn on this podcast and they tell you, hey, this is what matters. But until then, we'll have to make do with students and their opinions. So that's that. And that's great because you guys are firsthand information. So now the next part of it, which is something that really fascinated me, is your summer school at MIT Beaver. I think it's a great institute, in my opinion, and very, very competitive summer school to get into. How was your experience at Beaver? And do you recommend somebody who wants to make it to the Ivies go to competitive schools like Beaver? Because it's not something that, it's a selection process um, just like your college process, right? Like you can't just get in, you can't just apply and you can get in. So how is that experience like with MIT Beaver? And do you recommend it? What should somebody kind of wanting to get into Beaver do? And how's that prep looking like?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So to kind of just break it down into parts, I'll first answer, I guess, how to get into Beaverworks. So Beaverworks is again, it's a very objectively just pretty competitive program to get into. There's a process of writing essays as well as sending your high school transcript and getting letters of recommendations from your teachers. So think of it almost as kind of like a mini college application almost. So I think, yeah, you basically just have to give the application your best shot, write the best essays that you can, speak very passionately about the course that you're specifically interested in taking. For me, it was aerial vehicles, so UAVs. So basically, I got to like design, program, um, my own autonomous drone, which is really nice. So again, like the application process is pretty rigorous, and you're just gonna have to kind of give it your best shot. Now, as to how important I think Beaverworks is, I think I can speak to my case and then speak in terms of like a more broad common student case. I think for me it was very important because first of all, I wrote a lot of my Penn essays or college admissions essays on Beaverworks. So having a story, an experience like Beaverworks to talk about, and kind of talking about why that sparked my interest in engineering and pursuing that as a career was very nice to have. Um, and I think in that regard, it was also like one of my top extracurriculars. So it was very important for me to have that. Now, I think a summer program like Beaverworks is, I think that doing a summer program adds value, but the prestige of the summer program is what kind of elevates your application, right? So I would say that a very prestigious program like Beaverworks definitely elevates your application a lot because the admissions officers know that this is a competitive program. Again, it's not just something where like you pay to get in, or like even if you apply, it's a very like easy shot at getting in. This is actually a very genuinely competitive program. So college admissions know that you've went through this process, you were one of the top students applying, and therefore you were selected as a student or given a seat. So something like this, and also the name brand of MIT, carries a lot of weight. So I think the Beaverworks program is definitely like a great addition to have for your application, and I think it'll just overall for any student help them a lot. And kind of just speaking a little bit more about the experience that I personally had, I loved it. This was like my first time ever really working with this kind of complex, hardcore engineering material. I mean, in school, I'd done math, I'd done programming, but on like a very light basis, never something as rigorous and kind of like intensive as a summer program like Beaverworks. So this was a very great opportunity for me. I got to meet a lot of like-minded, brilliant students as well, who I still keep in touch with. And overall, it was just a very immersive, super, super fun, super, super well-run program in general.
That is great input. I have one question following this question. If somebody wanted to get into MIT Beaver Works, what is the kind of prep they need to do from advance? I do understand the SAT part of it, like you have to apply with a score. I do understand you have to write the essays, but these are the steps while you're applying. I'm talking about things subsequent, I mean, before you apply, what are the things that a student should keep in mind and prep up so that they can write those stellar essays and like get into beaver books.
Right, right. So again, kind of treat it as like a college application almost. Like you need to have steps or have had experiences prior to applying to the college to demonstrate why you're interested in applying to that college, right? So likewise, to a summer program like Beaverworks, because it's an engineering focused summer program, you need to have ideally some sort of engineering background, have some sort of personal projects to talk about in your essays, have some sort of club involvement at school, which demonstrates that you are interested in engineering, if that's a robotics club, if that's a programming club, um, or a science Olympiad club of some sort, right? So you need to be involved with those kind of activities beforehand. And also, I think you really need to identify why it is that you're applying to this program. Simply saying, oh, this program is prestigious and I want to join it is not enough, right? And the admissions officers to the program can see through it very clearly. You need to have a genuine story as to why you are actually interested in being part of this program and identifying that beforehand rather than through your essays and kind of vetting it out is not going to work. So definitely try and have a mental kind of like picture. If someone were to or if an interviewer were to ask you, "Hey, why are you applying to this job?" You're not going to say, "Oh, it's because this job pays well," right? You're actually going to think of an answer which speaks to why you're interested in that area of career, that subject matter, et cetera, right? So likewise.
So if you were to let our viewers and listeners know what is it that you did to get into MIT Beaver, like what are the top 4 or 5 things that you think you did, and if you can just speak briefly about each one of them, I think that would give them a sense of what is it, on similar lines they could do if they were wanting to be a part of the MIT Beaver Works program.
Yeah, for sure. So I think that just because I applied to this program, what, like 3 years ago now. It's a little bit of like a memory refresher as to like what exactly I specifically talked about. But I can definitely say that for one, I had a lot of personal programming projects. Not anything too fancy, not anything too crazy, but just something to demonstrate that, hey, this is something that I'm interested in. This is something that I'm investing time into outside of school because I'm generally passionate about it. So just talking about my personal, like my GitHub literally helped a lot, I think. I was also briefly part of the robotics team at my school. I didn't end up carrying this through later in my high school, but at the time I was, so I talked about that. And then I think also, again, like having a STEM course load in high school, your sophomore and freshman year, taking AP physics, taking AP calculus helped a lot. And I think also one thing that really helped me a lot was the fact that at the time I used to read a lot of tech articles. I used to read a lot of just like Tech Digest. And I was just pretty tapped into kind of like the tech space, and I was really trying to like learn more about it. And so I remember I pulled up in one of my essays, it talked about like, can you name something that just like interests you a lot? It was a very open ended prompt. And I talked about how people are using pig hearts for human heart transplants as like an emerging technology, which I thought was really cool because like a human heart transplant in and of itself is very complicated, but using a non-human form to carry out the procedure was very interesting to me. So I talked about that. So I think, yeah, just showing your intellectual vitality, your curiosity helps a lot with these essays.
Perfect. That's a great answer. Let's talk about some of your project experiences. I think I see two which really fascinated me. One is the NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory, and then there's the NASA Goddard Space Flight Center. Can you talk briefly about each one of them? What did you do? Because it's very fancy. Like, did you go to NASA, or was it a project that you did at home? All the good stuff.
Right, right. So actually, I got my NASA Goddard research position before I got my NASA Jet Propulsion Lab. And so I kind of used that to leverage a position at Jet Propulsion Lab because I was like, hey, I was working at Goddard before. And so, like, I kind of just networked my way up. But I can talk about Goddard a little bit first. So I was really interested in doing computer science research because at the time I had been, learning how to program, learning very basic, I guess, like forms of language, but I want to actually apply it to something beyond the scope of just like, a classroom, right? So I knew that research was the best way to do this. So I reached out to a bunch of professors at different universities, literally just through cold emailing. I would read their project repos and project biographies. I would talk about, hey, I'm pretty interested in going to this field. Do you think there's maybe a position? And so the NASA professor that I reached to, he actually got back to me and was like, hey, yeah, I think we do have something for you. And so I kind of just got it started from there. Now, as to the actual project that I've been doing at Goddard, I think it's pretty cool. So to give a very like summarized, bare bones kind of version of it, we're basically building an AI model that can detect and identify the surface composition of lunar rocks. So let's say like you have a piece of like basalt or like ilmenite in your hand, and you want to know what like exactly what it is. So you can they're basically building like a handheld, like think of like a ray gun almost. And so I'm part of the software design as an engineer for it. They basically point this handheld device at the object, and it'll return based off the light waves that are reflected off of it what exactly the composition is. So my job is to do kind of like the machine learning parts of it. And so that's what we've been doing for the past 2 years, 2+ years now. So that's what's been doing, or that's what I've been doing at Goddard. And at JPL, I actually temporarily paused it just because I wanted to focus more on school. But for that, kind of similar. It was very astrophysics based. I basically helped build and design a database for scientists to document statistics and facts about exomoons. So that's kind of like a very bare bones description of it. For both projects, it was very programming intensive. And also, to answer, I guess, like a little bit more detail for the question, like I have visited the NASA sites a couple of times. I've given a couple of talks, and I've applied to a lot of research conferences too, where I have given talks on my work. And my projects that I've been doing.
That's fantastic. So if you're saying that if anybody is really interested in doing one of these programs, probably other programs at NASA, cold emailing works, right? Like you just write emails to people and see if it works or it doesn't, because apparently that's what it sounds like. You got your, the Goddard Space Flight Center project from.
Right, right. I would definitely say that it's not as simple as just emailing. You definitely need to have the skill set to be able to work on the kind of project that they want you to work on, right? Because NASA, obviously they're working with very um, you know complicated, complex software. So if you're just a layman and you want to suddenly do research, I wouldn't say that would work, because again, like, you need to have the proficient background and skills to actually contribute. So I think that I had demonstrated that, because also, to keep in mind, one thing I didn't know was when I first started the project, they were kind of getting a feel as to whether or not I would be the right fit, um, and whether I would be able to actually contribute. So during their first initial kind of like take home projects, I put a lot of effort into those. I really spent time writing up polished code for them, and so I think they were frankly impressed by the work that I had done. So that was my way to like build a nice rapport with them and to get like a more like long term, I guess, comprehensive project, rather than just like a quick 2 or 3 month small project.
And you continue to work on it till date, like while you're at UPenn, or it just finished at that point in time? You are still working on it, right?
No, I'm still working on it. Things are much slower now, just because the team is pretty busy and the professors themselves, the mentors, are also busy. Um, but we are still currently working on it. It's just at a slower pace.
Perfect. And are there any specific research projects? Like, there's this a lot of people who come back and say research becomes absolutely mandatory. So, are there any published research papers that you wrote, and what were they on, if at all?
Yeah, so I didn't publish a paper to like a journal, but I did a lot of research posters and presented those at conferences. And so they were kind of just like updates, and different kind of softwares that I had built for my projects at NASA. So yeah, like I did go kind of down that route of like publishing slash presenting at conferences.
And how do you apply to these conferences if somebody was doing this? I mean, I know there are a lot of people who help you publish the paper and present it, but looks like you did all of this by yourself. So how could you go about applying to these conferences where you could present your papers?
Right. So I did actually have a lot of help from my mentors getting my materials ready. So they definitely did help me a lot throughout the process. But the way that you would kind of go about, I guess, the steps too, is first you have to submit what is called an abstract, which is essentially like a one paragraph, sometimes one page short summary of your project. And depending on whether or not it fits, first of all, maybe the conference criteria, kind of the advanced slash complexity of material that the conference is looking for, then what happens is reviewers who host the conference, usually there's their PhD people and professors themselves, they'll take a look at your abstract, and depending on whether or not they think it's I guess good enough, if you want to call it, they'll accept you or deny you to the conference. And once you're accepted, you then start actually building your poster or your paper or whatever sort of medium it is that you want to convey your project.
Perfect. And anything else that you think you did that contributed, or you think had a very heavy impact on you getting into Penn? Like, besides all the things that I asked, NASA, or all the stuff like the APs, or anything else in terms of project that you thought stood out, and actually heavily led you to like kind of getting into Penn. What do you, if you have anything?
Yeah, so I definitely think that one thing I guess we didn't talk about or bring up was, and that I think heavily contributed to my admissions to Penn, was my nonprofit, which I founded and built in, again, like I think end of my sophomore year. I don't quite remember, but that was definitely like one of the biggest activities I had on my activities list, because it checked a lot of boxes which I didn't have. Um, I guess to provide a little bit of explanation on what I mean by that is you could say that, my NASA research, my beaverworks program, my course load, they all kind of show that I'm a very STEM technical, proficient engineer. And so in that regard, they're all very like replaceable in the sense that, oh, if I maybe didn't have beaverworks, I would still have a strong application. I would still have the checkbox, crossed off for, oh, does he have a STEM background? But this nonprofit, I think, showed that I'm also a leader, and that I'm a self starter, which is something that my application wouldn't have without my nonprofit being there. So I guess to provide a little bit of context on my nonprofit, it's called STEMbridge, and basically we provide free competitive math and programming classes to students in middle school. So again, like we mentioned, the AMC pathway. If people watching are familiar with the USICO pathway, we provide free classes for that. So I guess different than your traditional math class, we actually cater these classes to the AMC pathway or to whatever kind of math competition. So I think for us, that was something that I knew that I was really interested in. That was something that I had the skill set to provide, um, you know, resources for. And a lot of my friends were also in that space, so we thought it was a good idea too. And we kind of really built it up from ground up to a level where it was actually impressive on the application. I think that saying, "Oh, I had like a community level nonprofit" is not enough nowadays. I think you need to have something of the state or nationwide level. We built it up from having one library literally offering our courses to over 15 different libraries across 30 different states offering our courses. So we built it up from like the district to the community to the state to the nationwide level, um, all the way through that sequential progression. And so not only having that on my application was really nice, but also being able to talk about it in my essays. A lot of essays will ask you, how did you provide back to your community? How are you involved in your community? And so having this as like an experience to talk about was super helpful. So I definitely think that was one of the shining points in my application for sure.
That's good. And last two questions before we very quickly wrap up. Second last question for you is how important are essays? I'm asking this because with the advent of ChatGPT, and you were in one of those cycles like you just got in last year, a lot of people are either using ChatGPT to draw inspiration or rephrase, answers. So, one, what is the importance of essay, and two, up till what extent is it okay to use ChatGPT in the sense of being inspired or using it to brainstorm rather than literally having the AI write the essay, considering you are an AI major. So what's your take on that?
Yeah, so to answer the first question, essays are very, very important in your application, especially for a caliber of school like an Ivy League. Your essays, I know I mentioned how, SAT scores, AP scores are not going to make or break your admissions. Essays will make or break your admissions, right? Because every student applying has similar, if not near identical, stats, scores, grades, right? So these essays are really the differentiator between, which student do I pick out of this pile. So your essays are very important. And as to the extent of which I think AI usage is like ethical or should be used, um, frankly, AI chatbots don't really provide good essays. So using it as like the essay is something I would harshly not recommend, because the quality of essay is just, first of all, it's not good. Second of all, I'm pretty sure the admissions officers have tools to detect now whether or not an AI or an essay was AI generated. So that's number two. Second of all, or sorry, third of all, I think that the AI doesn't know your story, right? Only you know your story. You can't ask an AI to write an essay talking about you. It needs to literally, the purpose of the essay is for you to write about you. And so I don't think an AI bot can ever replicate that. I think it's okay to ask AI bots for ideas or to even ask it to maybe like, you know, give feedback on an essay. I personally used AI to come up with a lot of synonyms, and just like phrases that I used in my essays. For example, if there's a word that I didn't like and I couldn't think of a new word, I would ask the AI chatbot, "Hey, can you like generate a new word?" That's kind of what I did. But that's literally the most that I ever did, and I think the most that I ever needed to do. Um, so I think, yeah, that is kind of my response to all of that.
That's great. I think this sheds a lot of idea. This sheds light on a lot of things that are going around where people are just using AI to, kind of rephrase essays or using them to generate ideas. Personally, I don't think it's ethical. And last but not least, I think people will know, this is not you writing. Even if it's your story, people will know this is not you writing the story. This is the AI chatbot reproducing it, even if it's the sharpest one. And I think it's a turn off. Lastly, how has just the Penn experience been? Like, you've been there almost, this is your second semester. So, how has that experience been? Anything that stands out as a highlight in this experience so far?
Yeah, definitely. I love Penn. I'm having an amazing time here. I would say that Penn is very intense. It demands a lot out of you, not so much as people would think academically, but more so socially, because again, the centerpiece of Penn is Wharton. It's a business school. A lot of just the social interaction here is around like networking, kind of just like building or climbing up the social ladder. So there's just a lot of kind of like social entertainment, or not entertainment, but like you have to be socially, I guess, like always alive when you're going about campus. So that's definitely something that I think is unique to Penn. I really like how everyone here is super supportive. It was a very different experience from my high school, frankly, because in my high school, everyone was trying to compete to get into college. And so no one really wanted to help each other out. But at college, it's like a completely different experience. Everyone wants to help each other out. Everyone wants to excel together. A lot of my upperclassmen friends, they provide me the resources I need to get through classes, give me advice on, how to go about recruiting or go about intern applications. So having resources everywhere has been super nice. And I think honestly, Penn is a work hard, play hard school. So you spend a lot of time grinding out your academics, but at the same time, there's a lot of opportunity for you to kind of relax, appreciate time with friends, appreciate the activities that go on around campus. So I think, yeah, it's just overall an amazing school.
Perfect. And what are the kind of students you won't recommend to Penn? Like, I think college application is a good fit. So I think you're finding Penn so well designed because you're a good fit for it. But I think it could be a bad fit for somebody who probably doesn't align with the culture. So who do you think is not an ideal student for Penn?
Yeah, that's actually a great question. I would say that someone that's not ideal for Penn is someone that's more introverted or someone that is just an introvert in general. Introverts at Penn, I've literally seen it. They struggle a lot to break into social circles. They struggle a lot to kind of get involved with the school culture because, again, everything here is just so socially alive. A lot of the events are hosted by Greek life. A lot of the events are hosted in the dorm halls. So if you're not kind of by nature very social, outgoing, you like to talk to people kind of person, you'll find it very hard to gel with the vibe and the culture. So I would 100% say that if you are the kind of person that likes to on the weekends stay in, read a book, then Penn is not the place for you.
Okay, perfect. So I think I got answers to all my questions, and I think this is a great interview. While interviewing you, I learned a lot about Penn, and thank you so much, Ishan, for your time. I truly appreciate all that you did, and I hope you had a good time too. And if there's any last minute, last comments, last feedback, anything that you'd like to like our listeners and viewers to know, that would be great.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me, Rima. It was a great interview. You asked a lot of great questions. So I'm just really happy that I got the chance to kind of talk about some of the things I did in high school, some of the things that are going on at Penn. Overall, I think, yeah, I just had a great time.
Thank you so much, Ishan.